A's and their future here in Oakland or maybe elsewhere. I'm Steve Dempsey with the Bay Area News Group. Joining me today is Andy Dolich. Andy is a sports franchise expert, and he's been affiliated with nearly every franchise here in the Bay Area. He's also best known for playing a part in the NBA Vancouver Grizzlies move to Memphis. And hopefully he can shed a little bit of light for us here today. Andy, thank you very much for joining us.
Always a pleasure, Steve.
Thanks. Also joining me is Alex Hall. Alex, as some of you may know, is the top blogger for Athletics Nation, and he's going to give us his views on what's going on, along with you, the fans, because since the many changes with the A's, Alex has been getting a lot of response from fans. So, Alex, thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
All right. Well, just to kind of recap, and this thing gets a little complicated, so I'll try to simplify the best I can here. A little while ago, the A's went through a big transformation when co-owner Lou Wolf stepped down as managing partner, and he is planning on selling much of his stake of the team. So that really touched off some shifting around. Wolf was replaced by John Fisher, the majority owner, and team president Mike Crowley is now in an advisory role. So Dave Cabal is now the team president, and he is also remaining as president of the San Jose Earthquakes. So with all that taking place, Andy, what does that mean for the A's, the city of Oakland, and the fan base?
Well, first of all, we know that this is three-dimensional chess because you can't talk about the A's without the Raiders. And it looks like the Warriors, based upon the court decision yesterday in San Francisco or the day before, are well on their way to relocating to San Francisco by the 2019 season. Simply stated, you've changed people and you've changed the dynamic of how they're going about the search for ultimately the holy grail of building a new ballpark in Oakland, and that's a positive. I know Dave Cabal. I appreciate and respect what he's done at the Earthquakes and the building of Avaya Stadium. And it's also somewhat, I think, under the radar that the A's essentially own the Earthquakes. If you ask the man in the street about that, they might not know it. So that tie-in is logical in terms of Dave taking on this responsibility to ultimately bring, as he said, new eyes to the stadium circumstance with the A's. The only thing that really isn't different is that John Fisher has always been the majority owner. And to me, what I saw in this announcement, where the shakeup took place, Crowley is aside, Dave Cabal is in, John is going to take a more active role, is that John wasn't at the press conference. And I scratch my head to that. Now, we'll talk further, I'm sure, about locations, what's real, what's not. But at least there has been a change. It's like a baseball trade. You're bringing new players in and you're waiting to see what their capabilities are.
Alex, what do you think? What do you think all this means for the team and the city and the fans? Maybe the fans gave us a little insight on that too.
From that fan perspective, this whole stadium issue has been dragging on for so long that it's almost easy to just lose interest or even forget that it's going on in the background all of this time and to get jaded about just think, oh, it's never going to happen. I'll believe it when I see it. That kind of feeling is pretty easy to get after 10, 15 years of this going on. Every few months, every year, we'll get a piece of news about a new study coming, a new report, a new environmental thing, an announcement from the commissioner about what a top priority everything is. But just seeing the shakeup of some names, for whatever reason, that piece of news felt like the first actual development in quite a while. The first thing that really got my attention and made me think, maybe we're actually about to move forward here and actually get somewhere. And that, I don't mean that in any negative way to the people on the way out. A shakeup like that gets my attention. And it also makes me feel good that this really will happen in Oakland. And after years of talking about relocating to other cities, it does seem to me like it's going to be in Oakland one way or the other, right?
Alex, I have a question for you, having been involved with A's fans for a long time. What are you hearing from those A's fans that you're talking to that, let's say, aren't in the delusional category about this latest move?
That are in the delusional category, and then I missed the last few words.
That aren't. I mean, the people that you speak to that are involved in communication with you, those that have a rational sense of what is doable in the future, what are you hearing from them about this move by Fisher and replacing people on the executive side?
Well, it seems to me a lot of the people who are now taking these roles are a lot of the same ones who just built that earthquake stadium. And I like you were saying, it's a lot of the same people overall, but it seems to me like there's now a group that is spearheading this that just did this whole project a few years ago successfully and finance and everything. So that seems to be the prevailing, a generally positive feeling that now leading the charge have definitely done this before.
Well, I think first off, you know, what does it mean with Lou Wolf being out of the picture? And I'll throw that out to anybody and whoever wants it.
Well, I'll jump in first. You know, I've known Lou for a long time. I have great respect for him and what he's done. And you also know that his son, Keith, I believe, is still heavily involved with the A's search for a new stadium. The one part of this, Steve, that we have talked about, I think, previously as it relates to the A's specifically in this conversation and the Raiders is the fact that John Fisher has the financial wherewithal. He has the development wherewithal. He had it with Lou. You can say he has it with David now and the team that he's put in place to actually create a new stadium, to also build a retail component in and around the Coliseum location, which is what the lot group seems to be talking about. I mean, they're still in closed session, so we haven't seen all the details of what the city and the county will agree to. But I don't understand. I mean, I do appreciate the revenue sharing money that the A's are getting from Major League Baseball. I do understand the asset appreciation of $180 million purchase price by John Fisher and Lou Wolf and what the team could be sold for today. But they've had this ability, you know, as Alex talked about, this has been going on for however you define it, 6 years, 8 years, 10 years, a long time. And other teams have built stadiums in a shorter time period in our own market. So why hasn't John Fisher made a decision? And I am not one that believes that there's still additional research that needs to be done between Howard Terminal, the Coliseum site, downtown, Laney, etc. That's all history. It's been looked at by a lot of smart people. Why haven't the A's actually made a definitive decision and moved ahead? That's the large question for me.
Alex, what are the fans saying with Lou Wolf not being in the picture? I know probably a lot of comments were on the field, but anything off the field that they were talking about?
I mean, you don't have to watch the broadcasts long to see the fans in the stands with the signs that aren't big fans of Lou. I imagine that a lot of sports fans aren't super happy with their owners. That's pretty normal. But I guess there was a feeling that he just wasn't getting the job done on that they were going in so many directions and none of them were working out. And there was always questions about how much he was focusing on a stadium, how much of the focus was on the big village surrounding it. I don't know. the feeling that the new group gives is more of a focused direction of just go forward, get this baseball stadium done. On Athletics Nation, I just don't think that Lou Wolf had a positive reputation. I would say somewhere between neutral to a little bit on the negative side.
I would say it's fair enough. I'll throw this out to both of you again. The failure to get the team to move to San Jose, was that a big part of, as what happened to Lou Wolf? I mean, his friend Bud Selig, didn't come through for him, and the whole thing kind of fell apart. As you mentioned, Andy, I know they were looking, different sites in Oakland, but they were putting a lot of eggs in the San Jose basket at one point, and that whole thing collapsed. So, did that lead to Lou leaving?
Well, from a perspective of somebody that wasn't in the room and doesn't know the answer to that, those of us who get to comment on this, that's a hard one to say because it's all speculation unless you've been directly a part of the deal. And clearly the focus on San Jose was extremely important to Lou and to John Fisher. And when that left the station without a team at Diridon Station, maybe the dynamic changed. However, there's been a lot written, and Alex can talk about how much of it shows up on Athletics Nation, that John Fisher has a much more positive view of the Howard Terminal potential than he does at the Oakland Coliseum site. And ultimately, when you have two very strong forces that have industry experience and have money and have shown in various developments over time that they can be successful, you can't build a stadium in two locations. We just want it built in one. And in this case, I happen to agree with Lou. I think the complexity of Howard Terminal, you don't have to go any further than to look at the Warriors' original site at Piers 30 and 32 in San Francisco, which they ultimately abandoned because they understood that the amount of money, hundreds of millions of dollars of extra money, and more importantly, the amount of time based upon all the legislation when you're building anything on or near the water, would basically make their project unfeasible. And they walked away and ultimately did Mission Bay. So with all of the uncertainties about Howard Terminal, transportation, infrastructure, safety, everything on the estuary, the Port of Oakland, labor at the Port of Oakland, if John Fisher and Dave Covell in a short period of time, and I also think that time is important here, if we're having this discussion again several months from now, and there isn't specific, logical, understood movement from the A's, then you might have changed the deck chairs on the SS Oakland Elephant, but you really haven't changed their strategic direction.
Okay, Alex, can you play off that a little bit, maybe from a fan spot perspective?
Well, first off, you had mentioned the talks about San Jose, and going back to that sort of where the opinion of Wolf comes from, that was a big part of it. There was a big gamble on shooting for that San Jose goal. Frankly, if that's the way things had gone, I think people would have eventually got used to it, and maybe it would have been a good thing overall. But certainly, if you talk about trying to move a team even that close, out of the city they've been in for a couple of generations, you're going to get a whole lot of backlash. And so to have that be one of the defining features of your era is an attempted move out of the city they're in, it's going to give you a bad name with a lot of the fans. And so when I talk about a negative perception, a lot of it's going to come from that. It's pretty hard to get away from that, especially if it then doesn't work out and then people don't get to see the good things that could have maybe come out of it if that had been the way it went. So as for these Coliseum sites, Andy had mentioned, and I've heard the same kind of thing, that there were different viewpoints between that Coliseum site or going elsewhere like Howard Terminal. I've read and learned as much as I can, about some of these other sites like the Terminal and Laney College. And there are a lot of people at least on Athletics Nation, who are very passionate supporters of one or the other. It does sound like both of them have huge obstacles that would need to be overcome. I don't know if that means that they can't be done. Maybe they can. The Giants did a whole lot of big things to do what they did with their park. Mm-hmm. But that Coliseum site, it would certainly be the easiest one, right? Because that's already what it's being used for. The question would be if you can spruce it up enough. If you're trying to make the big baseball village kind of idea with all the surrounding things, is that a thing you can pull off in that particular? It's kind of an industrial area. Not like those other sites that are a little closer to maybe a downtown kind of area. And so those are the kinds of things you have to weigh. And as far as the fans, you'll find a pretty even split, I'd say, between those three sites, between current site, the Terminal, and the Laney College. And the supporters of them have a lot of seemingly very good arguments for why they like each one. And I guess what it'll come down to is, first off, what the Raiders do. We really have to wait for that, I guess.
I mean, Steve, the lifeblood of any franchise, as we've already talked about, is the fans themselves. And clearly, if you look at the great history of the A's in Oakland, it would be, in my mind, a tragedy if the team left the market. If they moved someplace around the market from the Coliseum site, so be it. Ultimately, it won't necessarily be the fans' decision, and I'm not saying that's right. It's going to be the people putting the money into the deal, which is going to be John Fisher and the city and the county, because they haven't even talked about what those infrastructure costs would be at an alternative site to the Coliseum. There isn't anybody that can argue that from a transportation standpoint, from an ease of entry to exit, the Coliseum site wins hands down. Now, if you turn the clock back 17 years and think about Mission Bay, you could also put a picture of Chernobyl next to Mission Bay, and it would be hard to decide which was the worst place. Now you look at Mission Bay, and it literally is miraculous. I mean, not just with what's happened with the Giants and AT&T Park, which is viewed as one of the best, if not the best baseball parks in the country, but the massive amount of medical research that's changing the world as we know it in what's done in and around Mission Bay. I believe that the same circumstance could show itself in and around the Coliseum. Call it Mission Bay, East Bay. But we continue to see a circumstance where the A's and the Raiders and the city and the county, when is the last time we have seen those decision makers seriously sit down and figure out how two of these teams can remain in Oakland over the long term? The Warriors, we have to say goodbye. And if there's one team that didn't need to move, it's the Warriors, because they were sold out. They're miraculous. Their fan base is as vibrant as any in the NBA right there in Oakland. But they've made a decision that San Francisco should be their home. To think that one or both of the other teams would leave is almost incomprehensible. And so I believe it can only happen if all of these parties actually sit down and work it out. So we'll see what happens.
Okay, but Cabal from almost the get-go talked about getting a new home for the A's, and a lot of that talk, if not the whole thing, was about staying in Oakland. Now, isn't that encouraging? What do you think about that, Alex?
I'll agree that staying in Oakland is definitely the best course. You hate to see a team, it's been around for so long, even so close to San Jose. I was saying before that there could be some positives to come out of something like that. Certainly a bigger place, a bigger population. But that being said, I'm definitely happy the team is staying where it is. You got a very good amount of history here. And although the fan base isn't obviously the biggest in terms of raw attendance number, there's certainly the diehard element, and you've got plenty of that, generous long support and the big bleacher crowd and all that. And I'm glad that it has come down to that. Just hope that it actually.
Okay.
I promised myself, but I just lied. I promised myself I wouldn't bring politics into this discussion. So Alex, please don't hold this against me. And I won't show blue or red. But when our new president is sworn in on January the 20th, I think that's the right date, he's promised to make America great again. And we all know that he doesn't have 4 years to do that. He's got a lot less to turn the naysayers to his side. And I would say the same thing about the A's. They've made a change. Now it's time to make the A's great again, both on the field, which history has shown they can do, and history has also shown that they can put a lot of people in a stadium in Oakland that wasn't exactly the coolest, neatest stadium in all of baseball. I know because I helped do it with a lot of other people for 15 years. So making America great again? Well, I happen to think America's been great for a long time and still is. The A's, they've been great at some times. They've been not so great at others. But there's no doubt with the young basher like Chris Davis and many of these other players, it's time to get back to the business of winning championships, or at least having a strategy that you're going to do that, and you're going to build a new stadium that the fans who've been so loyal for so many years truly understand and support.
That's a good analogy, and it really does go for both parts. On the field, now you had a couple of last place seasons now, so your chance to become great again on the field, show that you can still do that using the strategies that we've been using for so long. And then, off the field, show that, off the field, the team has not been, has not had a good light on it in a long time with all of this, if you're looking at this from a Nationals perspective, from some other market, you're going to see this kind of bumbling franchise going along, not meeting the goals that it's been setting for itself. So so some new sheriffs in town, this is their chance to turn around and regain that confidence. We just saw a little bit different situation, but with the Warriors, we just saw an ownership that was very unpopular and very ineffective. And then the new group came in. They didn't get a whole lot of patience at first, a couple of boos very quickly, but then they doubled down. They met those goals that they set for themselves, and they really did. I mean, man, it's that Warriors franchise 10 years ago, and remember what it felt like, to be a fan of that, and now to look at it now, it's unreal. And of course, no one's asking for the A's to reach that kind of goal, or any team to reach that kind of goal. But this is the chance to use this as a turning point and get people back on board.
Yeah, and the key there, you've identified it, Alex, is it's not just lucky. It's not just that a lot of people passed on Steph Curry and he became, the magical mystery tour leader of, 3-point shots from another county. But it was Joe Lacob, as you talked about it, being booed off the court during the Chris Mullin honor. Whoops. And Rick Barry saying, come on, people. And then hiring Steve Kerr, letting Mark Jackson go, which was pretty unpopular, even with Steph Curry.
It was bold. Yeah.
Bringing in Bob Myers, bringing in Rick Welts, putting a number of people that some don't even know who are massively capable, and turning that franchise, I know a little bit because I worked for Chris Cohan, from an afterthought to the most popular team, not just in America, but one of the most popular teams on the face of the globe, with more stars than they know what to do with, and KD and Clay, and just ask Draymond, he's a star too, and Steph. And if you would have told people 7 or 8 months ago, hey, here's one for you: Raiders 9-2, 49ers 1-10. Alex, could we have gotten some good money on that one? Uh,
You get the sports almanac from Back to the Future and take that one back. Yeah, a few years. You'll win some.
Sports can change in a very short period of time, and we see it happen every day in every city. What I am most optimistic about as it relates to the A's in this conversation is the fan base is there. Many of them have left and gone to the Giants. Many of them have just been neutralized. And if I ask you today, Alex, to look at buying tickets for the Giants regular season, I think you'll find a coordinated advertising and marketing campaign. If I ask you today to go to the A's website, to look at TV, to look at digital, in the A's selling tickets for next year, what do you see? I don't know the answer, but I don't see a strategic, automatic marketing plan that should already be in place, because you need to tell people, again, if I look at a Chris Davis, if I was there, you'd know Chris Davis, you'd know his name, and it starts with a K and not a C. And I just don't see enough of that. So the opportunity is there as we speak to start the marketing engine, to start getting people back.
And maybe, maybe that just, you're talking about starting from the top down and getting the proper leaders in charge to put the right people in place to make all that happen. And so hopefully that was the first step. I know the A's front office, does try to run, as efficient and sort of, I don't want to say bare bones, but there's a lot more, there's other teams that have a lot more people running in the front office and maybe more manpower could help. I don't know, but one way or the other, you get those right leaders in charge, putting those right people in place, and you can start to work on some of those smaller things that the casual fan might not have thought of immediately. Some of that marketing stuff, whatever, might not have occurred to us that would be such a huge step in turning everything around. But yeah, an off-field thing like that could help a lot.
I just know, Steve and Alex, that when I'm lining up and I want to get a linguiça, I want to see what's happening on the field that my back is turned to. And if I don't have those flat screens at every single concession stand, I'm not a happy camper. First, I want to get my linguiça, but of that aside, it's those small touches. It's the paint. It's looking at the concourse. It's reaching out to the fans. I believe Dave Cobble when he says that's what he's going to do. But as we talked about, sports fans have a very short memory, right? Like elephants, or the opposite of elephants. Now's time to get it done. It's pretty simple.
Okay, but one thing I'm curious about is financing. Is financing going to be a problem?
I'll let Alex go first, and then I'll jump in.
Is financing going to be a problem? that might be one. That might be one for Andy.
All right. As I saw your face going, yeek, finance. I don't want to talk about that.
I just feel like you're going to know the more details about that.
Yeah. Well,
I just know what you report on that.
I have a difficult time balancing my checkbook, but in these circumstances, clearly we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars to build a new ballpark. What seems to be coming out of the Ronnie Lott conversations with the city and the county is Libby Schaaf has been very, very direct and consistent that there's not going to be a penny of public money spent on this project. Yet, what seems to have leaked out yesterday on the Raiders situation is $200 million worth of public infrastructure money. $200 million, Steve and Alex, that's more than zero, isn't it? I think. Okay. Now, John Fisher and Lou Wolf, I think, have been quoted many times saying that when and if, or if and when the A's make a decision to build a new ballpark, there will not be one penny of public money. They will spend it all. I believe that for no seconds whatsoever. Again, it depends on where the location is, but if the A's happen to be the last team standing and the Raiders do get to relocate to Las Vegas, I doubt very much, having been a part of some of these deals, that the A's will say no public money, because they will have a massive amount of leverage if that happens. So public financing, Steve, yes, it's magnificently important in this circumstance. We'll see how it plays out.
And of course, it's possible for both things to be technically true if that public financing comes in the form of, say, doing all of the massive cleanup at something like Howard Terminal, or doing a bunch of the fiddling around with the college, and then the actual stadium part is paid for by the team. Then you could have a team coming through on its promise to, build the stadium on its own, but still the taxpayer did put in quite a bit on the periphery to make that possible. But I agree with you, and I don't even mean in terms of just the A's or just these individual people, but just when I hear from the big company that we're not going to use any of the tax. I don't believe that till I see it, and we saw it once with the Giants, so now I believe that one. But yeah, I agree with Andy. Just in general, okay, if you say you're not going to use any public money, I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, and Steve and Alex, again, Steve, your timing in putting this video call together is perfect, because we have the ongoing debate between the city of Santa Clara and the 49ers now about some stadium issues vis-a-vis who pays what to whom. There's some questions about the Giants and how that money goes back and forth. That usually happens in these circumstances after hundreds of millions or billions of dollars are spent, and everybody goes, did I make a good deal or not? And you're going to have to make some of these decisions vis-a-vis the A's and the Raiders right now without knowing ultimately how it works out. And again, the past is prologue. You look at the Raiders PSL program and what's owed on that, and what might be in effect the amount of money or how the tickets are paid for or seats are paid for in a new A's stadium. I mean, that's putting the cart before the horse, but I totally agree with Alex. If you believe that zero public money will be put in any new A's stadium, I have a new bridge going from Alameda to some part on the peninsula that I want you to invest in.
Okay, I have a fan question from Stomper. If Fisher can't get a stadium solution soon, do you think that Joe Lacob becomes an option to buy the A's?
Well, I'll go to Alex first, because he hears theories, he hears rumors, he hears stuff. I'll weigh in.
I haven't heard anything specific. Oh, sorry.
After he gives his opinion.
Certainly, I've in the comments and stuff, of course, people are going to make that natural connection. I haven't seen any news outlet of any kind as a possibility, but
well, Stomper,
he did a good job with the Warriors, so yeah. Hey,
is Stomper the Stomper or another Stomper? Which Stomper are we?
Could be the Stomper.
Okay, so answer to Stomper seriously. If John Fisher, and it's a large if, because he doesn't need to sell the team, he has massive personal wealth, the team is making money on a yearly basis, which some people just have a difficult time getting their arms around, and the team is worth 4 to 6 times what he bought it for several years ago. So why should he sell it? Until Major League Baseball changes its revenue sharing circumstances, until they go through this next full review on a stadium, I don't see a sale. Nobody's going to question the miraculous turnaround of the Warriors. However, the Warriors still have a major challenge in building their new arena, Chase Center in Mission Bay. Looks like all the legal hurdles are over, but that is going to be privately financed. The Warriors have not talked about whether that will be a seat license arena, which hasn't really been done before in sports. What are the ticket prices going to be? That's going to be a $1 billion or north arena, $1 billion arena. So if John Fisher decided to sell the team today, forget about Joe Lacob and Peter Guber. Could they buy it? Sure they could. Would that be popular amongst sports fans? Absolutely. But there are another 100 people living in the Bay Area that would buy that team by 3 o'clock today if they could.
Yeah,
Well,
that
that
makes a
is
lot of sense.
interesting. So, one last question, and then we'll cut it off here. Anyway, I mean, from what we heard from yesterday's news concerning the Raiders, is it possible that the Raiders stadium issues, I guess we'll call it, could that interfere with what the A's want to do, or does it, or will it be just two separate things going on?
Alex talked before about two things can be equally true. I think you said, Alex, and I agree with that. But two things can be equally complex. I think if you go away from the fairy tale circumstance of both teams working independently, figuring it out, it'll all work out great for the city. There'll be two shining new stadiums on a hill. I don't think that is realistic. And no matter what the terms are that come out of the city council negotiation with the lot group, it's not going to have $750 million worth of already in the bank state city approved money. It's not going to have the $650 million that Sheldon Adelson has said he's going to put in the deal. And that has an asterisk, as we know, in terms of the debate as to what Adelson is going to want for that 650, or the 500 million and the 500 million that Mark is putting into the deal. So I think, to a certain extent, the lot attempt is really a Hail Mary, and more power to Libby Schaff for trying to do it. We'll see what happens with the ultimate power of Mark's NFL colleagues in terms of how they vote if and when it comes to a vote. As I've said before, I think the A's have massive power. I don't think they have legal veto power, but they have massive power in the complexity of this deal. But I also believe that Libby Schaff has subliminally made her deal in her mind that the last team standing, if necessary, will be the A's. Why? Because there's 81 games, there's more revenue, and the ownership has the financial wherewithal to actually do a deal where Mark has clearly stated he doesn't. He doesn't have the money to build in Oakland on his own, and that's why he's taken the Vegas deal.
And that point about the 81 games versus the 8 is one that gets brought up often in our comment section as well, and it's, I think, a very good point. And I agree with you that my perception is that the city is also realizing that it's just a better deal to have a baseball team. It gives you more. As far as how the Raiders affect the situation, connection got a little chopped, so I missed a little bit of what you said, Andy. So I hope I don't repeat. But it seems the two ways that it has the big effect are, one, which site you end up using, because I don't know how realistic it would be for both of them to remain on the Coliseum site together, which would mean if the Raiders are staying there, then that would mean a higher chance of the A's building somewhere else at one of these other sites that we've been talking about. So that's one way that, of course, the Raiders affect. And the other way, the financing that Andy was just mentioning a bit of there, being that if the Raiders do leave, the A's are the only game in town now, with the Warriors also gone, and that just opens up a bunch of leverage for them to get some of that public financing. And again, don't get me wrong, pledging no public financing is absolutely the best starting point. I'm very happy that that's where they're starting with the talk. Even if I'm cynical about it actually happening, it's a big deal to me that they're beginning with that goal, because you're not going to reach that goal unless you start with it, right? And so I wish all teams would do it on their own. They have the ability to do so. However, if the Raiders do leave, the A's the only one around, then yeah, it's going to be a lot easier for them to end up, getting a little bit of help just with that extra leverage. Whereas if the Raiders stay, as Andy was saying, they're going to need some money to stay. they have financial incentive to move and probably not the financial ability to do Oakland on their own. And so if the Raiders are getting a bunch of help from Oakland, that probably increases the chances of the A's actually following through and privately financing the whole thing, because that would probably be the only option at that point, it seems to me. And so the way the Raiders affect things is if they leave, you have a better chance of the A's on the Coliseum site with a little help. And if the Raiders stay, then the odds to me seem like higher of a privately financed elsewhere in Oakland at one of these other sites that it seems, Fisher might be a fan of anyway.
Okay, well, very nice discussion, guys. I really appreciate it. Andy Dolich, Alex Hall, thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. And that'll do it for today. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
Thank you.